Good evening, and welcome to Atheists Talk. Tonight, we're going to be discussing the question of whether people can be good without God. And with me tonight is a very prominent spokesperson for atheism, one of the original founders of Minnesota Atheists and Minnesota Atheists' current president, August Berkshire. Welcome, August.
Thank you, George.
So, the theological conception of morality is that morality was declared by a creator God who has the authority to do so because he created everything. What do you think is wrong with this model?
Right, the idea that unless God tells us what's right and wrong, we have no way of knowing and we could just run amok and be immoral. Well, there's some problems with that. My basic position is not only can we be good without a God, but that's the only way we can be good. We can't be good with a God.
All right, why is that?
Except accidentally. Well, first of all, we get into something called the Euthyphro dilemma. And that's the question, is something good because a God says it's good? Well, that makes it arbitrary. Then there's no unalterable truth the way religious people think there is. If a God's just saying it's good, well, he might change his mind. And how are we supposed to keep up with him and know what his latest revelation is as to what's good or bad?
Or his latest whim.
Right. Or is something inherently good and God just tells us that. God's just kind of the messenger. Well, then there might be some way we can find out without the God. So either way, we have problems with the God, with the Euthyphro dilemma.
Right.
Well, then we get into the whole idea of, well, what is a God? I mean, people think we know what we're talking about when we say God, but we really don't. What is a God composed of? If we say spirit, well, what is spirit? We know what spirit isn't. It isn't matter and energy as we know it. But we don't know what spirit is. So we don't know what a God is. We don't know how many gods there are. Maybe there are many and they're giving us all kinds of different instructions. We don't know. We don't know which gods are the true gods. So we have a lot of problems just with the very concept of a God to begin with. So how are we going to base morality on a God when we don't know what a God is?
Right. Well, of course, if you make this argument to any religious person, whatever religion he is, his response is going to be, well, I know.
Right. The God I was brought up in or I happen to believe. So let's move on from what is a God and say, okay, how is this God going to tell us?
And I think that we can anticipate that since this program was produced by Minnesota Atheists, our audience is probably going to guess the position that we're going to take on the God question. Yes.
Okay. Well, not only don't we know what a God is, but we don't know how a God transmits this moral message to us. So, for example, let's say he just gives us a moral sense in our brain, gives us a moral intuition. Well, how does this happen? Our brains generate our thoughts. So is a God reaching in with his invisible magic fingers and rewiring our brains to generate moral intuition that we otherwise wouldn't have? I mean, this just seems kind of ridiculous.
Plus, there is disagreement among people. So how do we know which one is being inspired by God?
Right. So God, if this is how God does it, reaching in with invisible magic fingers to rewire brains, he's inconsistent. He rewires Christian brains one way and Muslim brains another way, and other faiths another way.
I think that people may think that you're being intentionally facetious in this, but really, I do hear the argument from religious people that the proof of the existence of God is that people have a conscience. If people didn't have a moral conscience and know that they were doing something bad, how did that conscience get there?
Yeah, but they're arriving at different conclusions, is the point I'm making. So God seems to be giving different moral consciences to different people. Even, say, within Christianity, there's disagreement on gay rights. Someone will focus on, well, we're all God's children, and gays aren't any different from anyone else, and others will look at the Bible and...
there are many such disagreements. I think slavery was an historically important one in the United States.
So one way God could be informing us is this moral sense. Another way he perhaps could be informing us is a revelation to some sort of a prophet. But then again, we're having the same problems. We have all these different revelations to different prophets and how in different holy books. And so how are we supposed to know which is the true one? And how can we tell the difference between a revelation and a hallucination? I mean, if I started hearing what I thought was a voice from a God, I'm at least humble enough to say I'm probably hallucinating because we know humans are capable of hallucinating. We don't know that they're capable of hearing any message from a God. We have no evidence of that.
Right, and if throughout our whole lives we never hear this voice of God and someone claims to hear it, the most likely conclusion, I would think, is that he's wrong.
I mean, we hear a lot of people saying, well, I'm acting on orders from God. And usually we don't want to follow these people when we hear that said. Susan B. Anthony had a very good quote that I like. She said, I distrust those people who know so well what God wants them to do, because I notice it always coincides with their own desires.
Right, and
so we're creating God in our image.
Among political leaders, it always seems to coincide with the platform of their party.
Yeah. So the idea of revelations and holy books, you know, if God's doing it, he's not doing a very good job. He's being very incompetent, giving different instructions to different groups of people. It's not a reliable source to base our ethics on. Well, let's pick Christianity. Let's say that that's God's true revelation. I have no reason to suspect that it's any more true than any other religion, but most people in this country are Christian, and that's the religion they're going to be most interested in hearing us critique.
Right.
And a lot of times when I talk to Christians, they say, well, we all intuitively know that killing children is wrong. And if you're an atheist, you know, where are you going to get your moral sense? Well, before we get to that, let's look at this question, killing children is wrong, and let's see what Christianity says about this.
Okay.
And Christianity is based on the Bible. No Bible, no Christianity. So let's look at the character of God in the Christian Bible and see how he treats children. See if he's giving us a moral example. Well, it's recorded in the Bible that the character of God personally engages in mass slaughter of children. The first time is when he drowns everyone on earth in a great flood, and this would have included innocent young babies. Okay, I mean, not that I ever believe such a great flood ever happened, but if one is reading this even allegorically, it's a terrible, terrible story of mass slaughter of children. The second time God wipes out all the children is when he wipes out Sodom and Gomorrah. And maybe if there were some evil people there, but you know that there were children there. I mean, not that I believe this myth either, but it just illustrates what kind of character, kind of terrible character actually this God of the Bible is.
That's a good point. I think that that it's an a priori precept for religious people that God is good, that God is all good. That's part of their definition of what God is. And yet, if we were to take a look at any of these stories, that really doesn't seem to be that way. Now, you know, what about when people receive orders from God? You'd mentioned the possibility that it might be arbitrary, that it might be, or that there might be some other source of that produces what is good, that answers the question, what is good. Is God an authoritative source? Maybe God's wrong.
Which makes him an unreliable
source. Yeah. Look at the cases that I'm thinking of in which God orders people to kill others. And we might think, oh, that's terrible. The point that you're making, that God is giving very bad moral advice. So isn't the good person the one who refuses to obey the God?
Right. I mean, not only in the Bible is God killing children himself, but he's ordering humans to kill children. There are several cases in the Bible where God orders the Israelites to wipe out villages and utterly destroy everyone in them, or destroy everyone who believes in a different religion. And this is including children too. So God is giving, terrible advice. One thing is that Christians will say, well, that Jesus came and changed all that. Jesus is the nice God. Well, you run into some problems there, because then is Jesus God? And if he's God, isn't he the God of the Old Testament, or is this a different God? Do we have two separate gods now? Or is God changing his mind? But God's not supposed to change his mind, so which God are we supposed to follow? Now, there are not only are all these terrible passages in the Bible where God is wiping out people left and right, ordering the Israelites to wipe out people left and right, but there are some good passages in the Bible too. There's some nice things that being kind to one another, forgiving, etc., helpful to the poor. And the fact that we can recognize that these passages are bad, killing people who work on the Sabbath, killing gays, killing non-virgin brides, killing disobedient sons, that's all in the Bible. We recognize that's bad. We don't follow those things. And we try to follow the good things. Well, that means that we're bringing a sense of morality from outside the Bible to bear on the Bible.
Right.
We can't be using a biblical sense because it's going both ways. How do we decide which is the bad, which is the good? We're bringing a sense of morality that we have developed from outside the Bible to bear on the Bible, and properly rejecting the cruel things that God orders us to do.
Right. Now, I think I hear Christians all the time say, well, we have an answer for that, and give you their interpretation. And but as you mentioned earlier, that Christians disagree, that there are other interpretations that are possible of the Bible. Well, they present principles with how you interpret it, that you interpret the unclear passages by the passages that are really clear. Well, what they decide is really clear depends upon their beliefs, their beliefs going in.
Kind of like a Rorschach test in a way.
Right, and so people who are selective in what they accept and what they reject in the Bible, we call cafeteria Christians. But that when you come down to it, all Christians have to be cafeteria Christians.
Picking and choosing. And there's disagreement among Christians themselves, among things like the ethics of premarital sex,
right,
divorce, abortion,
slavery,
the death penalty, euthanasia, homosexuality. So these are some major things that Christians themselves disagree on and cite different passages of the Bible to bolster their case.
Right, right. Their claim is usually that if we have a moral question, how do we decide it? And the answer is, well, look at the Bible. And the Bible's supposed to tell us. But even if we accept that, I wonder if the Bible is, to any of them, complete enough to do that. I had a discussion myself in which I asked, well, how do you answer a question like, on the biggest moral issue of going to war? How do you decide if it's moral to go to this war, to invade Iraq, for example? And, well, got from some the answer, well, the answer comes centuries later from Aquinas. Well, no, you said that the Bible is supposed to be the answer to all of this. Okay, so they say, well, the Bible says there are just wars. Well, okay, but I understand there are just wars, but how do you decide? How do you make the decision about this one, whether this war is just? And really got the answer that, well, Christian morality is more concerned with how you save your soul, not for a question like going to war. Well, if it doesn't answer a question like whether or not one should go to war, isn't it awfully incomplete?
Yeah, and going to war affects the lives of hundreds of thousands of people sometimes.
Yeah.
So what greater question can there be?
Exactly.
So, well, some people will often bring up the Ten Commandments. Oh, well, we should just follow the Ten Commandments. Well, if you look at them, they're un-American and unconstitutional. If we tried to put these into law, They violate freedom of speech, freedom of assembly, freedom of religion, freedom of thought. So, for example, you shall have no other gods before me. Well, that violates the First Amendment, freedom of religion. Keep the Sabbath holy. Well, what if you don't want to? Again, violating freedom of religion. The 10th commandment is particularly strange. You shall not covet thy neighbor's possessions. Well, that's thought crime. It's a crime to think. We could never make a law out of this. So there's only 3 of the commandments out of the 10 that have any basis in American law. Yeah. Stealing, lying, and perjury.
As a formula for morality, I think it's a poor structure anyway. It's a canon. It says these are the rules. Follow these rules and you'll do the right thing. Well, as I said before, I think it's awfully incomplete, but any list, any canon is going to be incomplete.
And you can always think of exceptions.
Right.
You know, the Nazis come to the door and you're hiding Jews. Do you lie to the Nazis? Well, of course you do, but that violates one of the commandments.
And an excellent point. All that any rule like this can be is a percentage shot. That if you follow this rule, it'll be the right thing to do a good percentage of the time. We'd consider it to be a good rule if, you know, maybe it's an 80, 90% rule. But what about those exceptions? Isn't one doing the wrong thing if he follows the rule at a time when he can anticipate that the result is going to be bad?
Yeah. So I think we can conclude that ethics based on God belief or religion are a failure. We don't know what a God is. We don't know what the true revelation is. And if religious ethics were sufficient, we would quit looking, but we haven't. They've been a failure. Scientists and ethicists have continued to look. And if you're not looking at the supernatural world, or alleged supernatural world, then you have to look at the natural world.
Okay. Let's just cover one last point before we abandon God. Religious people say that what God provides to morality is certainty of punishment, that humans would have no reason to act morally. And if it weren't the case that they knew that when they die they were going to have this eternal and absolutely unbearable punishment, that if there weren't a God promising them hell, everyone would do whatever felt good.
Okay, so God is a supernatural policeman.
Right.
And maybe this even works if there isn't a God, as long as you believe that there's a God. And I think we've heard this before, of an invisible being who will reward you. He sees you when you're sleeping. He knows when you're awake. He knows if you've been bad or good, so be good for goodness sake. And as a matter of fact, this can motivate children to be good, you know, for a little while before Christmas. In fact, there's a moral hierarchy that a guy named Kohlberg came up with, Lawrence Kohlberg, 6 stages of moral development. And the lowest stage of moral development, it is a stage, but it's the lowest stage, is how do I avoid punishment? How do I stay out of hell, for example? The second lowest stage is what's in it for me, rewards, heaven. Or if I do this to please a God, maybe I'll have a good harvest or something like that. So they are motivations, they are stages of moral development, but they're the most primitive. And I'll skip the stages 3, 4, and 5 and go right to the top stage, which is to develop a universal ethical principles. And we've seen attempts at this with the American Humanist Association's document, Humanism and Its Aspirations, and also the United Nations Universal Declaration of Human Rights. So trying to figure out ourselves some universal ethical principles is the highest level of ethics.
Okay, well, if it's the highest, is it merely that we have established principles? In other words, are you espousing conventionalism? That something is good simply because we agree to it, and we sign a convention?
Okay. Well, to get to that point, I think we have to look at where we do get our ethics.
Okay.
If we're not getting them from a supernatural source, then the only thing left is a natural source. And whenever we're talking about nature, we immediately think of evolution, that maybe that is a source. And in fact, that's what scientists are looking at. But right away, we have a clue when we think of the following scenario. Imagine a mother has two children, a girl and a boy, and the girl starts hitting the boy. Does the mother say to her daughter, "Stop hitting your brother," because it says not to in a holy book, in the Quran, in the Vedas, in the Bible? You never hear a mother say that. What does a mother instinctively say to keep her children from fighting? Stop hitting your brother, you're hurting him. Well, that's consequences. Or, stop hitting your brother, how would you like it if someone hit you? That's empathy. So consequences and empathy, these just come naturally from the mouth of a mother.
How does the child always respond? The child always says, "But he hit me first."
Okay.
Or says, something to the effect that he took my toy. Mm-hmm. If I don't show him that something will happen to him, if he takes my toy, he'll take my toy again.
And that's fine, but these are still secular arguments. They're not saying, they're not basing them on God. Okay, he took my toy, he should be punished, and punishment will improve his behavior in the future. So these are consequences that we can observe, nothing to do with God's.
Mm-hmm.
So consequences just come from observation. I mean, any animal, any higher animal at least can observe consequences and learn from consequences. Probably most species, I would think.
Well, but
can learn from experience.
There has to be more than just consequences. There has to be evaluation too. Mm-hmm. The ability to look at the expected consequences and come to some decision as to whether this end result would be better, end result A would be better than end result B. Mm-hmm. Now, is there a basis for making that sort of evaluation?
Well, the more we can anticipate the future from past experience and from past observation, then we're maybe more likely to make a better decision. Well, what's better, what's worse? We have to look at the consequences, and it's not always clear. So, for example, you see your child struggling to do something, and your reflex is to help the child. You just have empathy, you want to help your child, but then you know from experience, well, maybe I should let my child struggle a little bit because he'll learn, and the lesson he'll learn from that struggle is better than me intervening to help and then he doesn't learn. So we're always weighing the good with potential bad. Even, I mentioned earlier, lying. Lying is usually a bad thing, but when the Nazis come to your door and you're hiding the Jews, then it's a good thing to lie.
Right.
So there can be mitigating circumstances which cause you to change a behavior that you would normally do. Yeah,
I think an important point in this argument that you're making is that how disagreement is handled. That when people believe that the correct action is what's declared to be moral by a God, then when people disagree, the only thing that they can rely on is, well, how do we determine the will of the God, and look at their holy book or contest their inspirations or whatever. But that's the only basis for coming to a decision.
And usually what happens is the violator of the holy book, punishment ensues for violating the holy book, and hundreds of years go by, and then finally someone realizes, no, maybe this passage in the holy book really isn't good, and we should reinterpret it or get a new revelation.
Right.
I'm thinking of the Mormon prejudice against blacks, and then they got a new revelation.
Right. On the other hand, in a godless ethics, when people disagree, and reasonable people can disagree, but the only thing they have to talk about is consequences. That nothing else will matter.
Evidence,
but what's going to be the result if we do A or if we do B?
And sometimes you're making your best guess. You're not really sure what the consequence is going to be. But you're not relying on revelation. Well, my God tells me this. Oh, no, my God tells me this. Well, how do you settle that argument?
Right.
Unfortunately, is often settled by war.
Yes, the arguments can be settled, but not necessarily to arrive at a good result, because they're talking, what they're arguing about is something that we consider to be wrong, based upon the existence of God, but also based upon this discussion, inconsequential.
This gets us to the point of, I think, laws. How are laws made? Laws have to be based on have a secular basis, evidence. We have laws, for example, against murder because we can demonstrate harm. Now, it may be that some holy books also have laws against murder, but that's not why we have a law against murder. We can demonstrate harm. It's okay if religions happen to coincide with our observations in secular law. That's fine. But now, looking at gay rights, for example, there's no secular reason to deny gay people equal rights, equal citizenship. Equal rights come from citizenship. We can see no reason. But the religious people are trying to employ their revelation from a God to make that into secular law, theocracy, basically, and to use that to deny rights to some citizens.
Okay, August, we only have a couple of minutes left. Okay. This evening has really flown by quickly. Would you care to summarize your principal conclusions?
Well, basically, I guess I'd say if you try to base your ethics on God belief, you're going to have a problem deciding which God, but even supposing you could decide on a God. If you then lose your God belief, then you've lost your basis for ethics. But if you base your ethics on secular things, consequences, evidence, these things don't go away. Whether you have a God or don't have a God, we can observe certain things happening in our environment, we can anticipate certain consequences. And so secular ethics are far superior to religious God belief ethics.
All right. Well, thank you, August. Now, this evening's gone by. We really had prepared much more material that we'd love to present. But if you'd like to hear more along these lines, I suggest that you come to any event of Minnesota Atheists. We have this sort of discussion just all the time, and we have many events, lunches, breakfasts, dinners, happy hours, and so on. And you can find about these, go to our website, which has been on your screen, mnatheists.org, and click on Get Awe-Inspired. AWE stands for Atheist Weekly Email, and subscribe, and you'll get our calendar every Friday with all the upcoming events, and there are always many. Or if you send us your postal address, we'll be glad to send you one issue of our newsletter, and this is full of interesting articles. So thank you for joining us, and if you're interested in us, we are interested in you.